The Saturday afternoon sun cast golden rays across the quiet suburban street in Portland, Oregon. The Martinez family's backyard barbecue was in full swing, with the smell of grilled burgers wafting through the warm August air. Neighbors chatted over the fence, children's laughter echoed from the swing set, and everything felt perfectly, blissfully normal. 3-year-old Emma Martinez sat on the front driveway, her small hands clutching bright pink and blue chalk. Her dark curls bounced as she hummed a tune from her favorite cartoon, carefully drawing what she insisted was a beautiful princess castle, but looked more like colorful scribbles to anyone else. Her yellow sundress, the one with tiny sunflowers that her grandmother had sent for her birthday, spread around her like petals as she worked on her masterpiece. "Daniel, can you grab the potato salad from the kitchen?" Maria Martinez called to her husband, wiping her hands on her apron. She glanced at Emma through the open gate that connected the driveway to the backyard. "Emma, baby, stay right there where Mommy can see you, okay?" "Okay, Mommy," Emma's voice rang out sweet and innocent. Daniel headed inside. Maria turned to flip the burgers, chatting with their neighbor, Mrs. Chen, about the upcoming school year. It was just a moment. 60 seconds, maybe 90. The time it takes to flip 4 burgers and laugh at a joke about burned hot dogs. When Maria glanced back toward the driveway, her heart stopped. The chalk lay scattered on the concrete. The Princess Castle remained unfinished, but Emma was gone. "Emma?" Maria's voice carried a hint of confusion, not yet panic. She walked toward the driveway, expecting to see her daughter chasing a butterfly or examining a ladybug. "Emma, where are you, sweetie?" Silence. "Emma," the scream that tore from Maria's throat was primal, a sound no mother should ever have to make. It shattered the peaceful afternoon like glass. "Emma, Daniel, she's gone." Daniel dropped the bowl of potato salad, sending it crashing to the kitchen floor as he sprinted outside. "What do you mean gone? She was just—" His words died as he saw the empty driveway, the abandoned chalk, his wife's face contorted in terror. Neighbors burst from their homes. Mrs. Chen ran across the street, her phone already dialing 911. Mr. Patterson, a retired firefighter, immediately began organizing. "Check your yards. Look in garages, sheds, anywhere a child could wander." "She wouldn't wander off," Maria sobbed, her legs buckling. "She's scared of going past the driveway. She wouldn't. Someone took her. Someone took my baby." Within 15 minutes, Portland police arrived, their sirens wailing through the once peaceful neighborhood. Officers spread out, knocking on doors, checking security cameras, questioning everyone. Within 30 minutes, roadblocks were established. Within an hour, the FBI arrived. Special Agent Monica Torres took Maria and Daniel aside, her voice calm but urgent. "I need you to think carefully. Did you notice anyone unusual in the neighborhood recently? Any vehicles you didn't recognize? Anyone showing interest in Emma?" Maria's mind raced, but everything was a blur. "No, I don't know. Oh God, I only looked away for a minute. Just 1 minute." She collapsed into Daniel's chest, her body racking with sobs. Daniel's face had gone pale, his jaw clenched. "Find her, please. She's just 3 years old. She's afraid of the dark. She sleeps with her nightlight on. His voice cracked. "She needs us." As the afternoon faded into evening, a K-9 unit pulled up. Officer Jake Reynolds, a 10-year veteran with the Portland Police Bureau, stepped out with his German Shepherd, Max. The dog was magnificent, strong, alert, his dark eyes intelligent and focused. Max had found 12 missing persons in his 6-year career. Reynolds prayed Emma would be number 13. "I need something with Emma's scent," Reynolds said gently to Maria. "A favorite toy, a blanket, something she's held recently." Maria ran inside, returning with a worn stuffed rabbit. "This is Mr. Hoppy. She takes him everywhere, except today. She left him inside because she didn't want him to get chalky." Reynolds held the rabbit to Max's nose. The dog inhaled deeply, his entire body focusing. Then Max's head snapped toward the sidewalk and he pulled forward, his nose to the ground. The trail led down the street away from the house. Not the wandering pattern of a lost child, but something more direct, more purposeful. Reynolds's stomach tightened. This wasn't good. Max pulled him 3 blocks south, then east toward an area where the neat suburban homes gave way to older buildings and empty lots. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in ominous reds and purples. Behind them, a small army of police officers, FBI agents and volunteers followed, flashlights beginning to click on as darkness crept in. Then Max lost the trail near a busy intersection. The dog circled, whining in frustration. Too much traffic, too many competing scents. Reynolds radioed back, his voice heavy. Trail's gone cold near Morrison and 47th. Back at the Martinez house, Maria stood in Emma's bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals and picture books. She picked up the pink blanket from Emma's bed, brought it to her face and breathed in her daughter's scent, baby shampoo and strawberry yogurt. "Please," she whispered into the darkness, her voice breaking. "Please bring her back to me. She's just a baby. She's my whole world." Outside, searchlights swept across the neighborhood. Helicopters circled overhead. News vans lined the street, cameras capturing Maria and Daniel's nightmare for the world to see. Someone had made coffee. Someone else had brought sandwiches that no one could eat. And somewhere in the growing darkness, 3-year-old Emma Martinez was alone, afraid, and crying for her mother. The clock on the wall ticked past 10 p.m. Emma had been missing for 8 hours. The real nightmare was just beginning. Day 1 became day 2, and the nightmare deepened. Officer Jake Reynolds hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform rumpled, but he wouldn't stop. Couldn't stop. Max panted beside him as they combed through the industrial district east of Morrison Street for the 3rd time. The German shepherd's usual energetic demeanor had grown more subdued, but his nose never stopped working. "Come on, boy," Reynolds murmured, offering Max water from a collapsible bowl. "I know you're tired, but there's a little girl out there who needs you." Max lapped the water, then immediately returned to searching, his powerful nose sweeping back and forth across the cracked pavement. These were the forgotten parts of Portland, abandoned warehouses, overgrown lots where homeless encampments huddled under tarps, rusted chain-link fences guarding nothing but weeds and broken dreams. Back at the Martinez home, Maria hadn't moved from Emma's bedroom. She sat in the small pink chair meant for tea parties with stuffed animals, her phone clutched in one hand, willing it to ring with good news. Daniel stood at the window, watching the sunrise paint the sky the same golden color it had been when Emma vanished. 24 hours. Every parent's worst fear lived in excruciating slow motion. "People are saying," Maria's voice was hollow, barely above a whisper, "they're saying after 24 hours the chances." "Don't," Daniel's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. Emma is alive. She's scared, she's crying for us, but she's alive. I can feel it." Special Agent Torres coordinated the massive search from a mobile command center parked on the street. Over 200 volunteers combed through parks, knocked on doors, distributed flyers with Emma's smiling face. The image showed her gap-toothed grin, her dark curls wild and free, her eyes bright with the innocent joy of a child who believed the world was good and safe. "We've checked every registered sex offender within a 50-mile radius," Torres reported to her supervisor via phone. "Alibis are checking out so far, but we're running second interviews. Traffic cameras caught nothing useful, too many blind spots in this neighborhood. It's like she vanished into thin air." But children don't vanish into thin air. Someone always knows something. By day 2, the media frenzy had reached fever pitch. Emma's face was everywhere, on every news channel, every social media platform, every electronic billboard from Portland to Seattle. Find Emma trended nationally. Strangers from across the country called in tips. Most led nowhere. Some led to wild goose chases. A few led to other horrors, different missing children, different unsolved cases, different families trapped in their own nightmares. Reynolds and Max expanded their search radius. They checked drainage pipes and culverts, places Reynolds hated to look because of what they might find. They searched the Willamette River banks, Max wading through shallow water while Reynolds's heart hammered against his ribs. "Please not the river," he muttered. "Please God, not the river." Max barked, not his alert bark but something else. He'd found a child's shoe, pink with cartoon characters. Reynolds's hands trembled as he radioed it in. 20 agonizing minutes later, the confirmation came back. Wrong size, wrong brand. Not Emma's. The search continued. Mrs. Chen organized meal trains for the Martinez family. Mr. Patterson led volunteer search parties, creating grid patterns, ensuring every inch of the surrounding area was covered. Emma's preschool held a vigil, 3-year-olds who didn't fully understand holding construction paper hearts that said, "Come home, Emma." Parents cried openly, imagining their own children, grateful and guilty in equal measure. On the morning of day 3, Reynolds sat in his truck, staring at the map covered in colored pins marking searched areas. Max lay in the passenger seat, his head on his paws, exhausted. The dog had worked himself to the point of collapse, and Reynolds wasn't far behind. "We're missing something," Reynolds said aloud. "There's something we're not seeing." He closed his eyes, trying to think like a predator. If you took a child, where would you go? Somewhere private, somewhere you wouldn't be disturbed, somewhere close enough to grab her quickly but far enough to avoid immediate detection. His eyes snapped open. The old Riverside Industrial Park. It had been partially searched on day 1, but the place was massive, 40 acres of abandoned storage facilities, most owned by a parent company that had filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago. Squatters moved in and out. The security was non-existent. "Come on, Max, one more try." The German shepherd lifted his head, tired but willing, always willing. They arrived at the industrial park as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. The temperature had climbed into the 90s, dangerous for a young child without water, without shelter. Reynolds tried not to think about dehydration, about how fragile 3-year-olds were. Max jumped from the truck and immediately his demeanor changed. His ears perked forward. His tail went rigid. And then he was pulling, dragging Reynolds forward with urgent force. "Max, you got something, boy." The dog was nearly yanking Reynolds off his feet, something he rarely did. They ran past rows of storage units, their orange doors faded and rusted. Unit 23, Unit 31, Unit 39. Then Max stopped at Unit 47 and started barking. Not his normal alert, this was frantic, insistent, desperate. Reynolds's heart exploded into overdrive. The padlock on the unit was broken, hanging loose on the hasp. He drew his weapon with one hand, radioed for backup with the other. "This is K9 Officer Reynolds. I'm at Riverside Industrial Park, Unit 47. My dog has alerted. I'm going in." "Wait for backup," Tor's voice crackled through. But Max was already squeezing through the partially open door, and Reynolds couldn't leave his partner. He kicked the door fully open, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The smell hit him first, urine, fear, and something worse. The unit was maybe 10 by 15 feet, packed with old furniture covered in stained tarps. And there in the back corner on a filthy mattress, curled into the smallest ball possible, was Emma Martinez. "Emma," Reynolds holstered his weapon and rushed forward. The little girl was alive. He could see her chest rising and falling, but she didn't respond. Her yellow sundress was dirty and torn. Her face was streaked with tears and grime. Her eyes were open but vacant, staring at nothing. "Emma, sweetheart, my name is Jake. I'm a police officer. You're safe now. Max found you, see? This is Max." He keyed his radio with shaking hands. "I've got her. Unit 47, the child is alive. I need an ambulance now." Max gently approached Emma, his tail wagging softly. The little girl's eyes flickered toward the dog, the tiniest spark of recognition. Reynolds heard sirens approaching. He heard running footsteps, but he also heard something else, the sound of someone running away, heavy footsteps pounding on gravel behind the storage units. "Suspect fleeing eastbound," Reynolds shouted into his radio. He wanted to chase, wanted to tear apart whoever had done this, but he couldn't leave Emma. Not now. Other officers pursued. Reynolds stayed, carefully wrapping Emma in his jacket, murmuring reassurances even as the little girl stared through him like he wasn't there. Within minutes, the scene erupted into controlled chaos. Paramedics loaded Emma onto a gurney. TORs secured the scene. And 3 units away, officers tackled a man trying to climb the back fence. Robert Henshaw, 47 years old, registered sex offender, maintenance worker for the industrial park, and the man who had stolen 3 days of Emma Martinez's life. As the ambulance screamed toward the hospital, Reynolds sat in his truck with Max's head in his lap and finally let himself cry. They'd found her, but what had been done couldn't be undone. The real battle was just beginning. Portland General Hospital's pediatric wing had never felt so heavy with silence. Emma Martinez lay in a private room on the 3rd floor, surrounded by every comfort modern medicine could provide. Soft blankets, gentle lighting, a rotating staff of the hospital's best pediatric specialists. Stuffed animals lined the windowsill, gifts from strangers across the country who'd followed her story. A Welcome Home Emma banner hung on the wall, placed there by hopeful nurses. But Emma hadn't spoken a single word since Officer Reynolds found her. Dr. Sarah Chen, the hospital's chief child psychologist, sat in a small chair beside Emma's bed, her voice gentle as morning rain. "Emma, sweetheart, can you tell me your favorite color? You don't have to talk if you don't want to. You could just point." Nothing. Emma's dark eyes stared at the ceiling, tracking shadows but seeing nothing. Her small body was curled into the fetal position, knees drawn to her chest, one thumb pressed against her lips but not quite sucking it. She looked like a porcelain doll, beautiful, fragile, and utterly, devastatingly empty. Maria sat on the other side of the bed, her hand hovering over her daughter's arm, afraid to touch her. Every time she tried to hug Emma, the little girl had gone rigid, her breathing becoming rapid and panicked. So Maria just sat there, tears streaming silently down her face, whispering the same words over and over. "Mommy's here, baby. Mommy's here. You're safe now." Daniel stood at the window, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. He hadn't slept in 4 days. His eyes were hollow pits, his face aged 10 years in less than a week. "Why won't she talk to us?" His voice cracked. "We're her parents. She should want us." Dr. Chen stood, motioning for them to step into the hallway. Once the door closed softly behind them, she took a deep breath. What Emma experienced was severe psychological trauma. Her mind is protecting itself the only way it knows how, by shutting down. This is called selective mutism, though in Emma's case, it's more accurately described as trauma-induced mutism. "But she's physically okay," Maria's voice trembled with desperate hope. "The doctors said there was no physical evidence of." "No sexual assault," Dr. Chen confirmed gently. The physical examination showed dehydration, minor bruising, and malnutrition consistent with being held without adequate food or water for 72 hours. "But yes, Mrs. Martinez, physically, Emma will recover." "Then why won't she talk?" Daniel's voice rose, frustration and fear bleeding together. "Why won't she let us hold her? Why does she look at us like she doesn't even know who we are?" Dr. Chen's eyes filled with compassion. "Because right now, Emma doesn't trust the world. That trust was shattered the moment someone took her from her safe, happy home. The man who took her likely told her lies, that you didn't love her, that you weren't coming back, that no one was looking for her. 3-year-olds don't have the cognitive framework to process that level of betrayal and fear, so her mind has essentially pressed pause." "How long?" Maria whispered. "How long until we get our baby back?" I can't give you a timeline. Some children recover in weeks. Others take months or even years. The important thing is that Emma knows she's safe, that she's loved, and that she has time to heal. Forcing her to speak before she's ready could cause more harm. What Dr. Chen didn't say, what she couldn't bear to say, was that some children never fully recovered. Across town, in the Multnomah County Courthouse, District Attorney Patricia Wolf sat in her office, staring at the case file that should have been a slam dunk. Robert Henshaw, 47 years old, previous conviction for attempted abduction in 2012, served 8 years, released on parole 2 years ago. He'd been working as a maintenance supervisor at Riverside Industrial Park, living in a trailer on the property. He had access to all the units. He had opportunity. He had motive. He had history. But what Wolf didn't have was testimony. The physical evidence was circumstantial at best. Emma's DNA in Unit 47. Henshaw's lawyer would argue she wandered in on her own. His fingerprints on her clothing. He was maintenance. He could claim he'd found her and was about to call police. The security footage showing his truck near the Martinez neighborhood on the day of the abduction. Coincidence. The industrial park was only 3 miles away. Without Emma's testimony placing Henshaw as her abductor, without her voice describing what happened in that storage unit, the case was built on sand. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Special Agent Torres entered, her face grim. "Tell me you have something," Wolf said. Torres shook her head. "Henshaw isn't talking. His attorney has him locked down tight. We searched his trailer, found some disturbing materials, but nothing directly connecting him to Emma. No photographs, no trophies, nothing we can use." "What about his previous conviction?" "Judge already ruled it inadmissible. Different circumstances, different victim profile. The defense will scream prejudice if we try to bring it up." Wolf threw her pen across the desk. "So we have a child who can't speak and a monster who won't. Perfect. What about pushing the trial back? Give Emma time to recover." "Henshaw's attorney is already making noise about speedy trial rights. We push too long, and he'll claim we're violating his constitutional protections. It's a nightmare." Torres sat down heavily. "That little girl went through hell. We found her in her own filth, dehydrated, traumatized. And you're telling me we might not be able to put him away?" Without her testimony, without her being able to tell a jury what he did, Wolf's voice was hollow. "The defense will shred our case. Marcus Webb is already preparing his strategy. I can feel it. He'll paint Henshaw as a man in the wrong place at the wrong time, Emma as a confused child who wandered off on her own. But she's 3 years old. How does a 3-year-old wander 3 miles away? Webb will say she got into someone else's car, someone who hasn't been caught yet. He'll create reasonable doubt, and the jury will have no choice but to acquit." Wolf dropped her head into her hands. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Monica. I've won cases with less evidence, but those cases had witnesses who could speak." In the county jail, Robert Henshaw sat in his cell, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. His attorney, Marcus Webb, had visited that morning with very good news indeed. "The child isn't speaking," Webb had said. "Without her testimony, their case is circumstantial at best. I'd say we have a 70% chance of acquittal, maybe higher." Henshaw had simply nodded, his dead fish eyes showing no emotion. He knew the system. He'd beaten it before. He could beat it again. Back at the hospital, as evening shadows lengthened across Emma's room, something small happened. A nurse had left the television on, a nature documentary about animals. When a segment about dogs came on, showing German shepherds working with police, Emma's eyes flickered. For the first time since her rescue, she showed interest in something. Her small hand reached out toward the television screen. Maria noticed immediately. "Emma, baby, do you like the dogs?" Emma's lips moved, forming words that made no sound. But it was something, the first crack in the wall of silence. And sometimes that's all hope needs. The smallest opening, the faintest light in overwhelming darkness. The question was, would it be enough? 2 weeks after Emma's rescue, Officer Jake Reynolds stood outside Portland General Hospital, his hand resting on Max's head. He'd visited 3 times already, but each time hospital policy had turned him away. No animals allowed in patient rooms. Regulations were regulations. But Dr. Sarah Chen had made a personal request. "I've seen children respond to therapy animals when nothing else works," she told the hospital administrator. "Emma Martinez needs something we can't give her. Maybe this dog can." Reynolds straightened his uniform, looked down at Max, and whispered, "Okay, boy, this isn't a search. This is something different. That little girl in there, she needs you to be gentle. Can you do that?" Max's tail wagged once slowly, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor. With each ascending number, Reynolds's heart beat faster. He'd found missing persons before. He'd reunited families. But he'd never seen the aftermath like this, never watched a child disappear into themselves, become a ghost in their own body. What if this didn't work? What if seeing Max triggered more trauma instead of healing? The door to Emma's room was partially open. Maria Martinez sat beside the bed, reading from a picture book in a hollow voice, going through the motions of motherhood while her daughter stared at nothing. Daniel stood at the window, his posture defeated, shoulders slumped under the weight of helplessness. Dr. Chen met Reynolds at the door. "Go slow," she instructed. "Watch for signs of distress. If she shows any fear, we stop immediately." Reynolds nodded and stepped inside, Max walking calmly beside him. The reaction was instantaneous. Emma's head turned. Her vacant eyes suddenly focused, locked onto Max with an intensity that made everyone in the room freeze. Her small body, which had been rigid and withdrawn for 14 days, shifted. She sat up slightly, her lips parting. "Emma," Maria's voice cracked with desperate hope. "Baby, do you see the doggy?" Max, sensing something profound, stopped moving. He stood perfectly still, his intelligent eyes fixed on Emma, waiting. He'd been trained to find people, to alert, to track, but no training had prepared him for this moment, for being not a tool but a bridge. Emma's hand emerged from beneath the blanket. It trembled in the air, reaching. "Can I bring him closer?" Reynolds asked Dr. Chen softly. The psychologist nodded, her own eyes glistening. Slowly. Reynolds walked Max to the bedside. The German shepherd approached with unusual gentleness, his movements careful and deliberate. When he reached the bed, he lowered his head, bringing it level with Emma's outstretched hand. The moment her small fingers touched Max's fur, everything changed. Emma gasped, the first sound she'd made in 2 weeks beyond shallow breathing. Her fingers gripped Max's coat, tightening. And then, like a dam breaking, she lunged forward, throwing her arms around the dog's neck, burying her face in his fur. Maria stood so quickly her chair clattered backward. "Emma." But Dr. Chen held up a hand, signaling everyone to stay still, to let this moment unfold. Emma's shoulders began to shake. Soft sounds emerged, muffled against Max's coat, not words yet, but sobs. Raw, grief-filled sobs that she'd been holding inside since the moment she was taken. Max stood absolutely still, tolerating the tight embrace, his tail giving one gentle wag as if to say, "It's okay. I've got you." Reynolds felt his throat constrict. He'd seen Max comfort scared children during searches, seen the dog's intuitive gentleness. But this was different. This was a 3-year-old child who'd been shattered, finding the one piece of her nightmare that made sense, the hero who'd saved her. For 10 minutes, Emma clung to Max. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sounds were Emma's diminishing sobs and the steady rhythm of Max's breathing. Finally, Emma pulled back slightly. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes red and puffy. She looked at Max, really looked at him, and then something miraculous happened. She leaned close to his ear and whispered something. It was barely audible, just a breath of sound, but everyone in the room heard it. "Thank you, doggy." Maria's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. Daniel turned from the window, tears streaming down his face for the first time since Emma's disappearance. Dr. Chen's professional composure cracked as she wiped her eyes. Reynolds knelt beside the bed. "Emma, my name is Jake. This is Max. He's the one who found you. He's a very special dog." Emma looked at Reynolds for the first time, her eyes still wary but no longer completely vacant. Then she looked back at Max, her small hand still buried in his fur. She leaned forward again, whispering directly into the dog's ear, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "She's talking to him," Dr. Chen breathed, her voice filled with wonder. "She's actually communicating." Over the next hour, Emma wouldn't speak to the adults. She wouldn't make eye contact with her parents. But she whispered continuously to Max, her tiny voice a secret conversation between a traumatized child and the dog who represented safety in a world that had proven terrifyingly dangerous. When it was time for Reynolds and Max to leave, Emma's reaction was visceral. She gripped Max's collar, panic flooding her features, a whimper escaping her throat. "It's okay, sweetheart," Reynolds said gently. "Max has to go home now, but he'll come back, I promise. Would you like that? Would you like Max to visit again?" Emma's eyes, so empty for so long, filled with desperate hope. She nodded, the first clear response she'd given anyone since her rescue. Maria approached Reynolds at the door, her voice thick with emotion. Would it be possible for you to bring him back, every day?" Reynolds looked at his supervisor's number in his phone, then at the little girl who was finally showing signs of life. "I'll make it happen, whatever it takes." Over the next 3 weeks, Reynolds and Max visited Emma every single day. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 3. Reynolds would sit in the corner with his incident reports and case files, working quietly while Emma and Max shared their silent communion. Emma began to improve. She still wouldn't speak to humans, but her whispered conversations with Max grew longer. Dr. Chen placed a small microphone near the bed one day, hopping to capture Emma's words, to understand what she was processing. The recordings were heartbreaking. "The bad man said Mommy didn't want me anymore," Emma whispered to Max. "He said I was bad and that's why I was alone. But you found me. You're a good doggy. You saved me from the dark room." "She's processing the trauma through Max," Dr. Chen explained to Maria and Daniel during a consultation. "He represents the moment her nightmare ended. He's safe. He's predictable. Unlike humans who betrayed her trust, Max is purely good in her mind." "But will she ever talk to us again?" Maria asked, her voice breaking. "Will she ever let me hold her?" "I believe so. This is progress, Mrs. Martinez. Slow progress, but progress nonetheless. Emma is finding her voice again, first with Max and eventually with you." But time was the one thing they didn't have. Because across town, District Attorney Patricia Wolf had received notice that the trial date was set, November 14th, just 6 weeks away. And Marcus Webb, Henshaw's defense attorney, had filed a motion to exclude any testimony from Emma Martinez on the grounds that a child suffering from selective mutism couldn't be considered a reliable witness. The clock was ticking, and Emma was still only talking to a dog. Judge Christine Blackwell removed her reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. In 32 years on the bench, she'd presided over hundreds of criminal trials. She'd sent murderers to prison, freed the wrongly accused, and navigated the murky waters of justice with a steady hand. But she'd never faced anything like this. Her chambers were quiet except for the ticking of an antique clock, a gift from her late husband. Spread across her massive oak desk were files, legal briefs, medical reports, and psychological evaluations. At the center of it all was a photograph of Emma Martinez, smiling at the camera before her world shattered. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." District Attorney Patricia Wolf entered, followed by Special Agent Monica Torres. Both women looked exhausted, carrying the weight of an impossible case. "Your Honor, thank you for seeing us," Wolf began, settling into one of the leather chairs across from the judge's desk. Blackwell gestured to the files. "I've read everything 3 times and I still don't have an answer." She leaned back in her chair. "Tell me honestly, Patricia, if we go to trial with what you have, what are our chances?" Wolf's jaw tightened. "Without Emma's testimony, maybe 30%. Marcus Webb is too good and the evidence is too circumstantial. He'll create reasonable doubt and the jury will have to acquit. And with Emma's testimony, 95% conviction." Wolf's voice dropped. "But Your Honor, you've read Dr. Chen's reports. That child can't testify. She hasn't spoken to a human being in over a month. She only talks to that dog." "Then we're back to 30%, Blackwell said grimly. Torres leaned forward. "Judge Blackwell, we know Henshaw did this. He was fleeing the scene. He had access. He had opportunity. His previous conviction shows pattern behavior, which is inadmissible in court, and you know it." Blackwell cut her off, not unkindly. "Agent Torres, I understand your frustration. I share it. But the law exists to protect the innocent, which means it sometimes protects the guilty as well." "So Henshaw walks free." Torres' voice rose with anger. "He snatches a 3-year-old from her front yard, terrorizes her for 3 days, and we just let him go because our witness is too traumatized to speak. If we force that child onto the stand, if we compel her to relive her nightmare in front of her abductor, what does that make us?" Blackwell's voice was steel. "We become victimizers ourselves, using her trauma as a tool for justice." Wolf closed her eyes. "I know. Believe me, Your Honor, I know. I lie awake every night wrestling with this. But if we don't convict Henshaw, some other child will suffer. Maybe next time that child won't be found alive." The 3 women sat in heavy silence, each carrying the impossible weight of their responsibility. Finally, Blackwell spoke. "The trial is set for November 14th. That gives us 5 weeks. Is there any chance, any at all, that Emma might recover enough to testify?" "Dr. Chen says it's unlikely," Wolf replied. "She's making progress with the dog, but she shuts down completely around adults, even her own parents. She won't make eye contact, won't respond to questions, won't allow physical contact. Then we proceed without her." Blackwell's voice was heavy with resignation. "We build the strongest circumstantial case possible and hope the jury sees through Webb's smokescreens. And if they don't, then Robert Henshaw goes free, and we all live with that on our conscience." Across town, Marcus Webb sat in the county jail's attorney-client conference room, reviewing documents with Robert Henshaw. Webb was in his late 50s, silver-haired, with the kind of practice charm that juries found trustworthy. He'd built a career on defending the indefensible and winning. "The prosecution is weak," Webb said, sliding papers across the table. "They've got circumstantial evidence, speculation, and a witness who can't speak. I've already filed the motion to exclude any potential testimony from the child on grounds of unreliability." Henshaw's expression remained flat, emotionless. "What are our chances?" "If the judge grants my motion, 90% acquittal, may be higher. Without the girl's testimony, they have nothing concrete." Webb leaned back, confident. "Even if the judge allows her in the courtroom, she can't testify if she won't speak. And according to the medical reports, she's completely nonverbal with adults." "She talked to that dog," Henshaw said quietly. "Dogs don't testify in court," Webb smiled. "The prosecution is desperate. They'll try to paint you as a monster, but without evidence, without testimony, it's just theater. And juries need facts, not emotions." "When will we know about the motion?" "Judge Blackwell will rule next week, but I'm confident. The law is on our side." Webb gathered his papers. "Just keep your mouth shut, show no emotion in court, and let me do my job. You'll be a free man by Thanksgiving." After Webb left, Henshaw sat alone in the conference room, a slight smile playing at his lips. The system had failed that little girl once when she was taken. It would fail her again when he walked free. At Portland General Hospital, Dr. Sarah Chen sat in a consultation room with Maria and Daniel Martinez, Officer Reynolds and his supervisor, Captain Linda Park. The atmosphere was tense. "The trial is in 5 weeks," Chen began. "I've been asked by the district attorney's office to evaluate whether Emma could potentially testify, and I have to be honest, in her current state, it's impossible." "But she's talking to Max," Maria protested. "She talks to him for hours. She tells him things, processes her feelings. Doesn't that count?" "It counts as tremendous progress," Chen replied gently. "But Emma talking to Max in the safety of her hospital room is completely different from Emma speaking in a courtroom filled with strangers, with her abductor watching her." "So that monster just walks free," Daniel's fist slammed on the table. "Our daughter suffers and he gets away with it." Captain Park cleared her throat. "Dr. Chen, I've been in law enforcement for 28 years. I've seen cases lost on technicalities, seen guilty people walk. But this feels different. There has to be something we can do." Chen was quiet for a long moment, her fingers steepled in thought. Then she looked up, her eyes bright with a radical idea. What if Emma doesn't have to speak to us?" Everyone stared at her. "I don't understand," Reynolds said. Chen leaned forward, her voice gaining urgency. "Emma has formed a unique bond with Max. He represents safety, rescue, the end of her nightmare. She trusts him completely. What if we could create a situation where Emma testifies through Max?" "Through a dog," Captain Park's eyebrows shot up. "That's not possible." "Hear me out," Chen continued. "Emma won't speak to adults because we represent unpredictability and potential danger. But in Max's presence, she feels safe. What if we brought Max into the courtroom? What if, instead of forcing Emma to address the judge, the jury, or the attorneys, we allowed her to simply be with Max, and if she chose to speak, she speaks?" Wolf's eyes widened. "You're suggesting we use the dog as, what, a security blanket?" "More than that. Max is Emma's safe space, her connection to the moment she was saved. If we can recreate that feeling of safety in the courtroom, there's a chance, a small chance, that Emma might find her voice." "This is completely unprecedented," Captain Park said, but there was hope in her voice. "No court has ever allowed something like this." "Desperate times," Reynolds murmured, his hand unconsciously moving to where Max usually stood beside him. "Emma talks to Max. She trusts Max. Maybe it could work." Maria grabbed Daniel's hand, squeezing tight. Would it hurt her? Would it traumatize her more? Chen chose her words carefully. "There's risk. Absolutely. Seeing Henshaw again could trigger a severe trauma response. But Emma is already living in trauma, and if we don't try, if Henshaw walks free, Emma will have to live knowing her silence let him escape justice. That carries its own psychological damage." "So we're gambling with our daughter's mental health," Daniel said bitterly. "We're giving Emma a choice," Chen corrected. "She doesn't have to speak, but if she wants to, if she feels safe enough with Max present, we're providing that opportunity. The decision is ultimately hers." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what Chen was proposing. Finally, Reynolds spoke. "I'd have to clear it with the department, bringing Max into a courtroom as, whatever this would be." "I'd have to convince Judge Blackwell," Wolf added, "and she'll think I've lost my mind." "And we'd have to prepare Emma," Chen said. "Gradually introduce her to the idea, see if she could handle it." Maria looked at her husband, tears streaming down her face. "What do we do?" Daniel stared at the table for a long moment, then raised his head. "We give Emma a chance to be heard. Even if she speaks through a dog, we give her that chance. Because sometimes justice doesn't come through conventional means. Sometimes it comes on 4 paws and a wagging tail." November 14th arrived cold and gray. the kind of Portland morning where low clouds press down on the city like a heavy blanket. Outside the Multnomah County Courthouse, news vans lined the street 3 deep. Reporters jockeyed for position, their camera crews setting up shots of the imposing building where justice would either prevail or fail spectacularly. Inside courtroom 4B, every seat was filled. Spectators had lined up since dawn, desperate to witness what media outlets were calling the trial of the decade. Local parents sat shoulder to shoulder with legal observers, psychology students, and victims' rights advocates. The air hummed with whispered conversations and suppressed tension. At the prosecution table, District Attorney Patricia Wolf arranged her files with mechanical precision. Her hands were steady, but her stomach churned. She'd spent the past 5 weeks building a circumstantial case that felt like a house of cards. One strong breath from Marcus Webb, and the whole thing could collapse. Beside her, Special Agent Torres radiated controlled fury. In her 20 years with the FBI, she'd never felt so helpless. They had the right man. She knew it in her bones, but knowing and proving were 2 different things. At the defense table, Marcus Webb exuded confident ease. He wore an expensive navy suit and a subtle smile that said he'd already won. Robert Henshaw sat beside him, wearing a bland expression that revealed nothing. He looked like an accountant, not a predator. Ordinary, forgettable, exactly what Webb wanted the jury to see. The jury box held 12 people who would decide Emma's fate, 7 women, 5 men, ranging from a retired teacher to a construction foreman. They'd been selected for their impartiality, their ability to follow the law even when emotion screamed for vengeance. All rise. Judge Christine Blackwell entered, her black robes flowing, her expression grave. She'd lost sleep over this trial, wrestling with questions that had no good answers. As everyone sat, she surveyed the packed courtroom. "Before we begin," Blackwell said, her voice carrying authority, "I want to remind everyone that this is a court of law, not a theater. There will be order and decorum at all times. Any outbursts will result in immediate removal." She turned to Wolf. "Counselor, your opening statement." Wolf stood, walking to the jury box. She made eye contact with each juror, letting them see her conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a 3-year-old girl named Emma Martinez who was playing with chalk in her driveway on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. She was safe. She was happy. She was home." Wolf's voice was measured, controlled. And then, in less than 2 minutes, she was gone, vanished, stolen by a predator who saw opportunity and took it. She gestured toward the evidence table. "Over the next few days, we will present evidence showing that Robert Henshaw abducted Emma Martinez, held her captive in a storage unit at Riverside Industrial Park where he worked, and would have continued to hold her had he not been discovered by law enforcement. We will show his access, his opportunity, and his flight from the scene when discovered." Webb stood smoothly. "Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution is stating as fact what has yet to be proven. My client was not discovered. He was working on the property where he was employed." Sustained. "Ms. Wolf, stick to what you can prove." Wolf nodded. "We will prove that Emma Martinez was found in Unit 47 of that industrial park, that Robert Henshaw had exclusive access to that unit, and that he fled when police arrived. The evidence will speak for itself." She returned to her seat, knowing the opening was weaker than she'd hoped. Webb's opening was masterful. He painted Henshaw as a working man, a maintenance supervisor doing his job, someone who'd made mistakes in the past but had paid his debt to society. He emphasized reasonable doubt, the lack of eyewitnesses, the circumstantial nature of every piece of evidence. "The prosecution will try to appeal to your emotions," Webb said, his voice warm and reasonable. "They will show you an adorable child and ask you to convict based on sympathy, but that's not justice. Justice requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and that proof simply doesn't exist." The morning proceeded with witness testimony. Officer Reynolds took the stand, describing the search and the moment Max alerted on Unit 47. Webb cross-examined aggressively, getting Reynolds to admit Max had false alerts before, that dogs weren't infallible. Forensic experts testified about DNA evidence. Webb systematically dismantled each piece, showing how it could be explained by innocent contact. By lunch recess, Wolf could feel the case slipping away. In a small conference room down the hall, Emma sat with her parents, Dr. Chen and Max. The little girl wore a blue velvet dress her grandmother had sent, her dark curls pulled back with a white ribbon. She looked like any other child dressed for church, except for her eyes, which still held shadows too deep for someone so young. She sat on the floor, her arms wrapped around Max's neck, whispering into his fur. "Emma, sweetheart," Dr. Chen knelt beside them. "Remember what we talked about the big room where Mommy and Daddy need to go." Emma's grip on Max tightened. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do," Chen continued gently. "But if you want to come with us, Max will be right there. He won't leave you, I promise." Maria's hands trembled as she smoothed her daughter's hair. "Baby, the bad man is in that room, but he can't hurt you anymore. There are police officers and judges, and Max will protect you. We all will." Emma finally looked up at her mother, real eye contact for the first time in weeks. Then she looked at Max, searching his dark eyes as if asking a question only the dog could answer. Max's tail wagged once. Emma's small voice emerged, barely above a whisper, "Doggy comes." Maria's breath caught. Emma had spoken to her, actually spoken to her. "Yes, baby, Doggy comes. Max stays with you the whole time." Court resumed at 1:30 p.m. Wolf stood, her heart hammering. "Your Honor, the prosecution has an unconventional request." Webb immediately tensed. "Objection, if this is some last-minute theatrical stunt." "Let her speak, Mr. Webb," Blackwell said sharply. Wolf took a breath. "Your Honor, we request permission to bring Emma Martinez into the courtroom, accompanied by K-9 officer Jake Reynolds and his service dog, Max." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Blackwell's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order." Webb shot to his feet. "Absolutely not. This is outrageous. The child is nonverbal, Your Honor. She cannot testify. This is nothing but a sympathy play designed to prejudice the jury." "Ms. Wolf," Blackwell's voice was ice, "explain yourself." "Your Honor, Emma Martinez has made significant progress with the assistance of therapy animal interaction. While she remains unable to communicate with most adults, she has formed a bond with the dog who rescued her. We're not asking the court to compel testimony. We're simply requesting that Emma be allowed to be present with her support animal should she choose to speak." "This is unprecedented," Webb's voice rose. "There's no legal framework for this. You can't just bring a dog into my courtroom and hope a traumatized child miraculously speaks." "It's my courtroom, Mr. Webb," Blackwell corrected coldly, "and frankly, this entire case is unprecedented." She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Dr. Chen, you're present." The psychologist stood from the gallery. "Yes, Your Honor." "In your professional opinion, could the presence of this dog enable Emma to communicate?" "It's possible, Your Honor. I cannot guarantee it. But Emma has demonstrated the ability to process and verbalize her trauma when Max is present. Without him, she remains completely nonverbal with humans." Blackwell looked at the jury, then at Emma's empty seat in the front row, then at Henshaw, who had finally shown emotion, a flicker of concern crossing his bland features. "Here's my ruling," Blackwell said. "Emma Martinez and the dog may enter the courtroom. The child will not be compelled to speak, answer questions, or interact with anyone. She is simply present. If she chooses to speak of her own volition, that statement may be considered by the jury. Mr. Webb, you may object for the record." "I object strenuously, Your Honor. This is prejudicial, unconventional, and—" "Noted and overruled. Bailiff, please escort Emma Martinez and her party into the courtroom." The doors at the back opened. Officer Reynolds entered first, Max walking in perfect heel position beside him. Then came Dr. Chen. And finally, holding her mother's hand with one hand and gripping Max's collar with the other, 3-year-old Emma Martinez entered the courtroom. Every person in the room seemed to hold their breath. The little girl's eyes were wide, frightened, darting around the large space. Then those eyes landed on Robert Henshaw, sitting at the defense table 20 feet away. Emma stopped walking. Her entire body went rigid. And everyone in courtroom 4B wondered the same thing. Would she speak? Or would silence win? Time seemed to stop. Emma Martinez stood frozen in the doorway of courtroom 4B, her small body rigid as a statue. Her eyes, wide with recognition and terror, were locked on Robert Henshaw. The man who had stolen her, lied to her, kept her in darkness. Henshaw stared back, his expression carefully neutral, but something flickered in his dead eyes. Fear. For the first time since his arrest, Robert Henshaw looked afraid. "Emma, sweetheart, you don't have to," Maria began, but Dr. Chen touched her arm gently, signaling silence. "Let Emma choose." Officer Reynolds stood perfectly still, Max beside him. The German shepherd sensed the tension, his ears forward, his body alert. He looked up at Reynolds, then back at Emma, as if asking permission to go to her. "Max," Reynolds said quietly, and the dog understood. He moved forward slowly, deliberately, until he was directly beside Emma. The little girl's hand, which had been trembling at her side, reached down and found Max's fur. Her fingers gripped tight, anchoring herself to the one thing in this terrifying room that made sense. The dog who had found her. The dog who had brought light into her darkness. Judge Blackwell spoke, her voice gentle but clear. "Emma, no one is going to make you do anything you don't want to do. You can sit with your mommy and daddy. You can stay right where you are, or you can leave. It's your choice." Emma took one small step forward, then another. Max walked beside her, matching her pace perfectly. They moved down the center aisle, every eye in the courtroom following them. Reporters leaned forward. Jurors sat transfixed. Even the bailiff seemed to forget to breathe. Maria and Daniel followed behind, their faces etched with fear and hope in equal measure. Emma reached the front row and stopped. She was now only 15 feet from Henshaw, close enough to see him clearly, close enough to remember. Marcus Webb whispered urgently to his client, "Don't look at her, don't react, show nothing." But Henshaw couldn't help himself. His eyes tracked the little girl, and for just a moment something cold and predatory flickered across his features. The mask slipped. Emma saw it, everyone saw it. The little girl began to tremble. Her breathing quickened, becoming rapid and shallow, the beginning of a panic attack. Dr. Chen moved forward, ready to intervene, to protect her patient from further trauma. But then Emma did something unexpected. She let go of Max's collar and stepped forward, away from safety, away from her anchor. She stood alone, a tiny figure in a blue velvet dress, facing the room full of adults who had failed to protect her. "Emma," Maria reached out, but Dr. Chen stopped her. "Wait," the psychologist whispered. "She's choosing this." Emma's lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried again, her small face contorted with effort. Tears began streaming down her cheeks. Her whole body shook with the weight of what she was carrying, the words trapped inside that needed to escape. She turned back to Max. The German shepherd stepped forward immediately, pressing against her leg, offering his solid, warm presence. Emma's hand found his head, and she leaned down, burying her face in his fur. The courtroom remained absolutely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the court reporter's fingers hovered over her keys, waiting. Emma whispered something to Max, too quiet for anyone to hear. The dog's tail wagged once slowly, as if encouraging her. And then Emma straightened. She kept one hand on Max's head, drawing strength from him, and turned to face the courtroom. Not the judge, not the jury, not her parents. She looked directly at Robert Henshaw. Her small arm extended, her finger pointing straight at him with absolute certainty. And in the profound, breathless silence of that courtroom, 3-year-old Emma Martinez spoke. "Bad man." Her voice was small but clear, cutting through the silence like a bell. Marcus Webb lunged to his feet. "Your Honor, this is—" "Sit down, Mr. Webb." Judge Blackwell's voice cracked like a whip. "The child is speaking of her own volition. You will be silent." Emma's hand trembled, but her finger remained pointed at Henshaw. More words came, halting but determined, each one pulled from some deep well of courage. He took me from my house, from my chalk, he said. He said Mommy didn't want me anymore." Emma's voice broke, tears streaming faster. "He said I was bad, that's why nobody came." Maria's sob echoed through the courtroom. Daniel gripped the railing in front of him, his knuckles white. "He put me in the dark room. It was scary. It smelled bad." Emma's words came faster now, a dam breaking after weeks of silence. "I cried for Mommy, I cried for Daddy, but he said they didn't love me. He said nobody was looking." "Emma, you don't have to." Judge Blackwell began gently, but Emma shook her head fiercely. "But he was wrong." The 3-year-old's voice rose, finding strength. "Mommy and Daddy did love me, they did look for me, and Max found me." She turned to the German shepherd, her hand gripping his fur. "Max came to the dark room. He barked and barked, and then the policeman came, the nice policeman who brought Max." Emma looked back at Henshaw, her young face showing a determination that shouldn't exist in someone so small. "That's the bad man. He took me. He lied to me. He made me scared." The courtroom exploded. Reporters frantically typed. Spectators gasped and wept. Jurors sat stunned, several with tears streaming down their faces. The bailiff moved quickly to maintain order as voices rose in a crescendo of shock and emotion. Marcus Webb was on his feet, shouting objections that no one could hear over the chaos. Judge Blackwell's gavel pounded repeatedly. "Order! I will have order in this court." But nothing could contain the moment's power. A child who hadn't spoken to a human being in 2 months had just identified her abductor in open court, had just told her truth in a room full of strangers because a dog had given her courage. Henshaw sat frozen, his carefully constructed mask completely shattered. His face had gone pale, his hands clenched into fists on the table. He looked at Emma with something like disbelief. How could this tiny child, this broken thing he'd terrorized, have found the strength to speak? Emma wasn't finished. She walked closer, Max right beside her, until she stood directly in front of the defense table. Henshaw flinched back as if the child herself was dangerous. "You're a bad man," Emma said again, her voice steady now, growing stronger with each word. "But you didn't win. Max found me, the police caught you, and now everyone knows you lied." She turned to the jury box, her small face serious. "He's the bad man who took me. I know it was him. I remember." Then Emma's strength finally gave out. She turned and ran to her mother, who caught her in desperate arms. Maria dropped to her knees on the courtroom floor, holding her daughter, both of them sobbing. Daniel wrapped his arms around them both, and for a moment the Martinez family was a small island of reunion in a sea of chaos. Officer Reynolds approached Judge Blackwell's bench, his own eyes wet. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to take Max outside. He's done his job." Blackwell nodded, unable to speak, her professional composure cracking for the first time in 30 years on the bench. As Reynolds led Max toward the door, Emma pulled away from her mother. "Max!" The dog stopped, turning back. Emma ran to him one more time, throwing her arms around his neck. "Thank you, doggy," she whispered, loud enough for the silent courtroom to hear. "Thank you for saving me." Max's tail wagged, and he gently licked Emma's tear-stained face. Then Officer Reynolds and Max left the courtroom, and with them went the last piece of doubt. Judge Blackwell looked at the jury, seeing their faces: anger, compassion, certainty. She looked at Marcus Webb, who had slumped in his chair, knowing his case had just imploded. She looked at Robert Henshaw, who stared at his hands, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. And finally she looked at Emma Martinez, 3 years old, sitting in her mother's lap, exhausted but no longer silent. "We'll take a 30-minute recess," Blackwell said, her voice thick with emotion, "and then we'll continue." But everyone in that courtroom knew the truth. The trial was over. Justice had found her voice, and it had spoken through the smallest, bravest witness any of them had ever seen. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and 43 minutes. In a conference room down the hall from courtroom 4B, the Martinez family waited in agonizing silence. Emma sat on the floor with a coloring book, humming softly to herself, a sound that would have been ordinary before her abduction but now felt like a miracle. She'd been drawing dogs, dozens of them, all looking remarkably like Max. Daniel paced by the window, checking his phone every 30 seconds even though he knew the court would call them. Maria sat with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white, lips moving in silent prayer. Dr. Chen watched Emma carefully, noting every gesture, every expression. The breakthrough in the courtroom had been extraordinary, but trauma didn't heal in a single moment of courage. The road ahead would be long. Officer Reynolds stood near the door, feeling oddly empty without Max at his side. He'd left his partner at the precinct, knowing the dog had done his part. This next chapter belonged to humans. When the bailiff finally knocked, announcing the jury had reached a verdict, Maria grabbed Daniel's hand so hard he winced. "Whatever happens," Daniel whispered, "we still have her. We have Emma back." But Maria's eyes were fierce. "That man needs to pay for what he did. He needs to pay." Courtroom 4B filled quickly. News of Emma's testimony had spread like wildfire, and everyone wanted to witness the conclusion. Reporters lined the back wall. Victims' rights advocates filled 2 rows. And in the front row, Emma sat between her parents, looking small but no longer broken. Judge Blackwell entered, her expression unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" The jury foreman, a middle-aged woman who taught 3rd grade, stood. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice was steady. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of kidnapping in the 1st degree, how do you find?" "We find the defendant, Robert Henshaw, guilty." The word guilty had barely left her lips before the courtroom erupted. Emma jumped in her seat, startled by the sudden noise. Maria collapsed forward, sobbing into her hands. Daniel's face crumpled, years of tension finally releasing. Judge Blackwell's gavel pounded. "Order, we're not finished." The foreman continued, her voice growing stronger. "On the charge of unlawful imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of endangering the welfare of a child, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty." Each word was a nail in Henshaw's coffin. The man sat motionless at the defense table, his face an ashen mask. Marcus Webb had his hand on his client's shoulder, but even the seasoned attorney looked defeated. When the jury was dismissed, Judge Blackwell turned her attention to Henshaw. "Robert Henshaw, you have been found guilty on all counts. Sentencing will be held in 2 weeks. Until then, you will remain in custody without bail. Bailiff, remove the defendant." As Henshaw was led away in handcuffs, he made one final mistake. He turned to look at Emma, perhaps hoping to see fear one last time. But Emma wasn't afraid anymore. She looked directly at him and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Bye-bye, bad man. You can't hurt anybody now." Henshaw's face twisted with rage and shame as the bailiff pulled him away. The courtroom doors closed behind him with a thunderous finality. 2 weeks later, Judge Blackwell's courtroom was packed once again for sentencing. This time, the atmosphere was different, not tense with uncertainty, but heavy with the weight of justice about to be served. District Attorney Wolf presented the state's recommendation: 30 years without the possibility of parole. This defendant showed premeditation, targeted a vulnerable child, and inflicted psychological trauma that will take years to heal. He has a prior conviction demonstrating a pattern of predatory behavior. The state believes maximum sentencing is appropriate. Marcus Webb argued for leniency, citing Henshaw's difficult childhood and mental health issues. But his heart wasn't in it, and everyone could tell. When Judge Blackwell spoke, her voice carried the weight of 32 years on the bench. Robert Henshaw, in my 3 decades as a judge, I have seen evil, I have seen cruelty, but rarely have I seen someone who would terrorize a 3-year-old child for their own gratification. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into him. You didn't just steal 72 hours from Emma Martinez. You stole her innocence, her sense of safety, her ability to trust the world. Those are things money cannot repay and time cannot fully heal. Blackwell shuffled her papers. However, I have also witnessed something I've never seen before in this courtroom. I watched a child find courage through the love of her family and the loyalty of an animal. I watched justice prevail not through legal maneuvering, but through truth spoken by the smallest voice in the room. She pronounced sentence: 30 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary without possibility of parole. You will also be required to register as a sex offender for life upon release, if that day ever comes. May you spend every single day of your incarceration thinking about the child whose life you tried to destroy, and the fact that she was stronger than you could ever be. The gavel fell with finality. This time, when Henshaw was led away, he didn't look back. 6 months later, on a sunny April morning, the Portland Police Bureau held a special ceremony in Laurelhurst Park. The spring air smelled of cherry blossoms and fresh-cut grass. Families spread blankets for picnics. Children played on the swings. And in the center pavilion, Officer Jake Reynolds stood at attention in his dress uniform, while Captain Linda Park pinned the Portland Police Bureau's Medal of Valor on his chest. Officer Reynolds demonstrated exceptional dedication, skill, and perseverance in the rescue of Emma Martinez, Park announced to the gathered crowd. His actions, and those of his K-9 partner Max, exemplify the very best of law enforcement. Applause erupted, but Reynolds stepped forward to the microphone, uncomfortable with the attention. I appreciate this honor, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. But everyone who wears this uniform knows we don't do this job for medals. We do it for moments like this. He gestured to the side of the pavilion where Emma Martinez stood with her parents. The little girl wore a yellow sundress covered in sunflowers, just like the one she'd worn the day she was taken. But this Emma was different. Her eyes were bright. Her smile was real. She bounced on her toes with excitement. Beside her sat a German Shepherd puppy, 6 months old, wearing a small blue bandana. Emma had named him Hero. Emma, Reynolds called out, would you and your friend like to come up here? The crowd parted as Emma skipped forward, Hero trotting beside her with the clumsy enthusiasm of youth. When she reached the stage, Emma didn't hesitate. She ran to Reynolds and hugged his leg. Thank you for finding me, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the park. You and Max are my heroes. Reynolds knelt down, his eyes misty. You're the hero, kiddo. You were so brave in that courtroom. Max helped me be brave, Emma said matter-of-factly. Is he here? Can I see him? On cue, another officer brought Max forward. The veteran German Shepherd, now retired from active duty after a decorated career, walked calmly to Emma. His tail began wagging the moment he saw her. Emma threw her arms around Max's neck, just as she had in the hospital, just as she had in the courtroom. I missed you, Max. Look, I got my own dog. His name is Hero, and I'm teaching him to be good like you. The puppy Hero yipped excitedly, and Max, with the patience of a wise elder, tolerated the younger dog's enthusiasm. The crowd wiped tears, phones capturing the moment. this beautiful evidence that healing was possible, that darkness didn't have to win. 2 years later, Emma Martinez bounced off the school bus, her backpack decorated with dog stickers bouncing on her shoulders. She was 5 now, about to start kindergarten in the fall. She ran up the driveway, the same driveway where she'd once drawn with chalk, where she'd been taken, but now it held no fear. Hero, now a full-grown German shepherd, bounded out to meet her, his tail wagging wildly. Emma dropped her backpack and hugged him, giggling as he licked her face. "How was your day, sweetie?" Maria called from the porch, her smile genuine and warm. "Good. I told everyone about Max and Hero in show and tell, and Mrs. Patterson said I was very brave." Emma grabbed Hero's collar. "Come on, boy, let's play." She ran into the backyard, her laughter echoing, the sound of a child who had survived, who had healed, who had won. Maria watched her daughter play, tears of gratitude sliding down her cheeks. Dr. Chen had been right. Emma still had occasional nightmares. She was still wary of strangers. She still insisted on nightlights in every room. But she was happy. She was healing. She was 5 years old and loved dogs and wanted to be a police officer when she grew up, so I can save kids like Max saved me. That evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Emma chattered about her day, her friends, her plans for summer. She was just a normal kindergartner with normal dreams and normal fears. Except she also had a story about darkness and rescue, about fear and courage, about a dog who brought light into her nightmare. And sometimes, when Emma was having a hard day, when the memories crept back in, Maria would ask, "Do you want to call Officer Reynolds? Maybe we can visit Max." And Emma would brighten, nodding enthusiastically, because she knew that the heroes who saved her weren't just part of her past. They were part of her present, her future, her forever. In a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon, on a street where children drew with chalk and families barbecued in their backyards, justice had been served. Not perfectly, not without scars, not without cost, but served nonetheless. Because sometimes the smallest voice carries the most power. Sometimes courage has 4 paws and a wagging tail. And sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers through a 3-year-old girl who pointed at her nightmare and said, "Bad man," and was believed. Emma Martinez was living proof that darkness doesn't get the final word. Love does, family does, loyalty does. And on a beautiful spring day, with Hero running circles around her in the backyard and her parents watching with grateful hearts, Emma Martinez was exactly what she should be. A happy, safe, loved little girl who knew with absolute certainty that she was worth fighting for. The end.